Welcome to the CURES Show, where we explore the cutting edge of wellness. So what happens when the old ways of losing weight just don't work anymore? And maybe you're not feeling so great either. Dr. Jennifer Stagg is a naturopathic physician. She is here to tell us why bitter is better for weight loss and digestion post 35. And she's actually the author of the book, The Bitter Prescription, Engineering Your Diet, Digestion, and Hormones After Age 35. It's a small book, but it is chock full of information, really breaks it all down. So it's kind of, it's double meaning here, right? We need bitters, but it's also the bitter prescription that we just can't eat anymore the way we used to.
Yeah, there's a lot loaded in there, but the prescription itself is to eat more bitter foods. And then the bitter truth is that we can't eat as much as we age. Well, you can eat, but you know, you're not going to necessarily get the results that you're looking for.
Okay. All right. So it's true that when people start, you know, they're starving themselves, or they're doing tons of cardio, or they don't know why, you know, hey, I could eat whatever I wanted before. If I ever wanted to lose weight, it was easy. And all of a sudden, it's not anymore. Why is that?
Yeah, so just as we age, things are changing in our bodies, obviously, and you see that physically, but inside your metabolism is changing too, so it's slowing down, unfortunately, and things are not really building anymore. You just reach this point where things are breaking down, and you don't need as many calories for that. So you really do have to eat less. And you, like, a lot of people observe this with like their parents or older people that they know, that they'll say they barely eat anything.
Yes.
And yet they're still like maintaining their weight. They're not wasting away. And the truth is, we really do have to consider calories as we get older. Obviously, those calories need to come from healthy foods. You can't just like eat a lower calorie diet and have it all full of, you know, non-healthy food. But you can have like lots of different variety and great foods in your diet that you won't necessarily feel like you're not eating much.
Okay, so let's talk about a hack, really. By eating bitter foods, it actually helps our metabolism?
Yeah, big time. So a lot of what's happening as we age is our digestive system is really changing, and so we're not getting as much nutrition out of our food because we're not absorbing as many nutrients, we're not breaking it down properly. And the bitters, these bitter pigments or compounds that are found in plants, are antioxidants, but they also bind these bitter receptors all throughout our digestive tract, and that helps us to better digest our food and assimilate those nutrients.
So you help a lot of folks lose weight.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll do DNA testing, sometimes you'll do a lot of different things, precision medicine, but this is something that kind of works for everyone, right? Like bitters. So let's start out with like breakfast. It's better to have something savory rather than sugary the first thing in the morning.
Right, for sure. So you really always want to be thinking about like getting your digestion sort of like primed and ready to go. So when you have something that's bitter, first of all, one other great benefit of bitter is that it'll help to decrease your appetite.
Okay.
It also is stimulating your digestive juices, your digestive hormones and everything, but it's also really helping to quell sugar cravings, which is a big issue that people have trouble with when they're trying to transition onto like a healthier eating plan.
Okay, so let's talk about like what would you eat for breakfast?
Yeah, so I mean, breakfast can be, you know, a broad variety of options for people. It could be something where they're doing bitters. I mean, berries are a really good source of bitters.
So
you can
berries
have
are bitter. Okay.
Yeah, so that counts as bitter. Any sort of like nut or seed that will have bitters in there. So you could do like berries, walnuts, and you could do like a really low sugar yogurt even. So that's something that like a lot of people are eating.
Like a Greek yogurt.
Yeah, so a lot of people are eating yogurt, but they might be eating vanilla or flavored yogurt and it's loaded in sugar. So you really want to get the really low sugar types of yogurt, or like plain ideally. But there are some nice brands that have sweetened with stevia or monk fruit, which are safe in terms of like natural sweeteners, and keeping that sugar content down, and then layering on more. And even yogurt itself has some bitterness to it.
Okay, so we've got some examples here. Like, this is the reason why this table is so full is we've got nuts and olives and all these different things. In fact, I never knew olives even came in this little package, but I'm gonna have one right now. These are little pitted, salted manzanilla olives. You got them at Trader Joe's.
Yeah.
So,
like super easy snack. And
So
people
easy.
are always looking for easy snacks, easy things on the go. Olives are rich in bitters, and then obviously it's a really good source of healthy oil. So because it has that olive oil in there.
So, but this is one package is only 55 calories.
Yeah.
So again, we have to watch our calories, but we also want to make sure the calories are high quality. So
Yeah.
having this, some people go, oh my gosh, what about all the fat?
Yep,
You
yeah,
know.
so that's healthy fat. So we don't really worry about fat when it comes from sources like olive oil or avocado, but as long as we're counting those like overall calories.
So don't go and eat, 2 avocados a day.
Yes, exactly. Like that's how it can really add up. Or people are eating avocados, they're eating with chips. Like if you're eating an avocado, avoid the chips. Just have it have it with vegetables, or do like you could even do a low carb wrap or something like that, and have turkey and avocado.
Like everyone's eating
peppers and
avocado
everything.
toast. Is that okay?
It's, yeah, but you'd have to count like during the day to make sure, like if that's going to be the toast part, if that's going to be your starch, then you probably don't really want to have much more starch during the day. That's if you're really trying to lose weight or maintain your weight, right?
So that's the thing, is that we realize that you think, oh, it's just one piece of bread, but the general American diet of like something carby in the morning, a sandwich for lunch, and then maybe more rice for dinner, that's way too much for people, especially if we're over 35.
Right, yeah.
Way too many starches.
Much starch, yeah. You really want to just make sure, definitely focusing on the healthy sources of fat. So, as we said, olive oil, avocado, nuts and seeds, fish, obviously, great sources of healthy fat. And then making sure you're getting adequate protein, and then also including all these vegetables that are rich in these phytonutrients or bitters.
So let's talk about, we've been saying bitters a lot. And some of the things, like I don't think a berry is bitter. I love berries, but they do have a stronger flavor. Like, what is a bitter?
Yeah, so a bitter is essentially just a phytochemical. So when we say phytochemical, it just means a plant chemical.
Okay.
That binds a bitter receptor in your body. And I said that there are bitter receptors all through the digestive tract, but there are also bitter receptors in our lungs, in our heart, even in our brain. So there's a lot of research going on about bitter receptors and the broad spectrum effects. Even our thyroid responds to bitter. So
And it helps us when we have bitters.
helps, yes.
Like, are there bad bitters
beneficial.
to avoid?
Yeah,
or?
there's a lot of studies on it being helpful, bitters being helpful for blood pressure control and for diabetes, better glucose management. And something that's really interesting, and I wrote about it in the book, is that our food system has intentionally been debittered to adjust to the American palate of sweet. So this is through genetic modification that a lot of the foods that are not organic or heirloom have a lot of the bitter taste, which also means those bitter compounds bred out of the food. And there's some researchers out there that link that to the obesity epidemic, because this has been going on sort of since the 70s.
Okay, so basically, during my lifetime, where sugar has been snuck into everything. I mean, once upon a time, it was just eat everything fat-free. That did not work for us. We all got fatter, right?
Yeah.
So sugar's sneaky. It's in everything.
Yeah.
So this is a way to counteract that.
Yeah.
So let's talk. So even like herbs, like simple. I know everyone's busy, especially if you're watching this and saying, okay, you're after 35, so you're a doctor, you have kids.
Yeah.
There's lots going on. So this doesn't have to be really difficult. It's more just adding lots of bitters to our diet.
It is, for sure. So, this time of year, it's easy to have herbs that you can grow in a little container garden outside. You can keep them on your counter year-round. Like, you'll find herbs like these.
Yes.
In the grocery store, right? They're there
Basil,
year-round.
rosemary.
Yeah.
Any kind of herb could be a bitter?
Any type of herb is going to be really concentrated in bitters. And it doesn't always have to be fresh. Obviously, this time of year, you can get a lot more fresh, and you can grow it outside even and have a lot more quantity of it available. But like dried herbs and spices are also really rich sources of these bitter bioactive compounds that are great for us. So just adding some of that to your meal, right? That you like chop up some herbs and sprinkle that on whatever you're eating will enhance the nutrition and the actual bitter content of your diet.
I mean, I know, I'm thinking back, I've done stories at different religious ceremonies, say at Seder's, they always have a bitter on the plate.
Yeah.
And a bitter would be arugula. Like, so back to biblical times, this idea that bitters are helpful to cleanse us.
So fascinating, right? That,
so
like
just having some arugula salad would be.
Exactly. So like even when you're thinking about like salad, you can, instead of using just romaine lettuce, like at least buy the mix, because diversity is also important too. So buy the big containers that are even pre-washed, organic, that have, like, a lot of times you'll see that it will have an herb blend in there. Okay. That's going to have a lot more bitters in there. But arugula is like a staple in our household.
I love arugula because you don't have to cut it.
Yeah, it's simple. You just buy it, it's already, and so this one in particular, obviously organic arugula is going to be better. Wild, anything that's wild is going to be rich in phytochemicals too. Like,
so that baby wild arugula, which you got at Trader Joe's.
Yep, so simple.
That's great.
Right? That is awesome. And you can put that as a base on your plate. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like made into an elaborate salad. You could cook a piece of salmon or chicken and you put your whole base of your plate, just put arugula there because it kind of wilts a little bit anyway.
Yep.
And then put your salmon there. And if you do have your starch with dinner, you can have that, some extra vegetables, dress it with a little olive oil. Like, this can be simple.
So spinach, kale, dark leafy greens.
Yeah, they're going to be great sources of bitters as well. And when you're starting out your meal, so when we were talking about like how to start your day, another great tip is to have like a bitter beverage too. So you could do like some lemon and water, and like in the Ayurvedic realm, and even just like in cultural, like Indian culture, a lot of people will consume just warm water with lemon to prime their digestion before they eat. Like, that's the first thing.
Well, a lot of detoxes are like warm water with lemon and maybe a little sprinkle of cayenne pepper in the morning. I know I've done some of your detoxes, and I do like that, setting time. So even before coffee, before anything.
Yeah, where you can do bitter. And herbal teas and tea in general, and even coffee is considered bitter as well, and so that can also prime your digestion. With coffee though, if you add creamers to it, then it's binding up some of those bitter compounds.
Okay, so this is the good thing when you're thinking, well, what can I eat that's good? First of all, a lot of this can be yummy. I mean, I actually I love basil. I wouldn't even think of basil as tasting bitter, but again, this is not always a bitter taste.
Right.
But salads, you can still have your yummy, chickens and stuff on top. But coffee, we all love coffee.
Yeah.
So in this case, coffee is actually good for our metabolism.
Yeah, coffee has a lot of different bitter compounds, and their coffee is incredibly complex anyway. It has somewhere near 1,000 different compounds in there. But it is a rich source of bitters, as is tea, black tea, herbal teas, green tea, great bitters in green tea especially.
Okay, good. A lot of people who've been watching this show know that that's sort of my afternoon thing. I always have my I don't know where it is right now, but just sipping the green tea all day. So even doing something simple, which often is offered at a restaurant, but having some lemon water before you begin a meal is helpful.
Yep, and then having, then you could order a salad if you see arugula on
the greens
menu,
first.
That's going to be great. Have that first, and then have your main course.
Okay. Now, sometimes, ideally we shouldn't be having as many starches, as much pasta, breads as we're talking about, getting our carbohydrates more from fruits and veggies. But does having a bitter meal, there's a lot of on the internet right now that having a bitter meal, sort of putting clothes on your carbs, will help? Like, if you're gonna eat that pasta meal, it's better to have a arugula salad first?
Right, yeah. So a lot of times it can help. So it's priming your digestion. It can help with glucose control. So as I said, there's studies on bitters and helping with glucose management, so your blood sugar doesn't get as high. However, you still would want a portion control, obviously, which if you're really trying to lose weight, you would want to portion control your pasta. But it is definitely a tool that will help people to actually have a more satiated response to food, that you don't feel like you need to eat as much.
Well, that's the thing, right? We all have these cravings, and as soon as you start eating sugar again, maybe you eliminate it or you're good for a while, it doesn't take much, and then you start eating a few brownies or whatever, and you're like, oh, I want it all the time.
You're back on it. Like, you're off the wagon is what I call it, right?
So anyway, but when we eat like this, there's a lot out there in the naturopathic world of don't count calories, count chemicals. And you do want us eating high quality organic food when possible.
Yeah.
But is that just not true that we don't have to count calories?
Yeah, it's not true. You really still have to be considerate of the amount of caloric value in foods, what's coming in, because there's no way you can just eat whatever and just have like your macro percentages in a place and not consider actual how much quantity is coming in.
But the good thing is if you're eating a lot of these salads and things like this, even as a starter or slipping them into smoothies, we're going to fill up and not be hungry.
Exactly. So it's often a way when you start, like if you don't want to make a radical change or you find radical change being very difficult, which I have a lot of experience with that in my practice with patients, that a lot of times how we transition people is to start introducing more of these bitters so that your palate is gaining more of a taste for bitter. And actually there are proteins in your saliva that change over the course of a couple of weeks based on what you're eating. So if you eat more bitters, people will say, I don't like if people are picky about vegetables, especially with kids, this is why this method of continuing to try it and introducing small amounts of it over time, it actually works because it changes how you actually perceive and taste food. Like the proteins in your saliva change.
Okay, right. Yeah, because kids can be tough, but that's why, okay, and I know you have them too.
Right, yeah.
So you just keep putting it on the plate.
So you keep doing it, and even like if I see like a child as a patient and they have a really limited diet and they're not eating much in the way of vegetables or fruit, and all their stacks are really like basically wheat-based, a lot of times the way to start to transition them is basically give them like a little bit of like fruit or vegetable as their like snack, and then you cut that carb snack in half. So they're getting they still get their carb that they're looking for, but they're only getting half of it and they're getting some nutrition, and they have to eat those berries or veggie before they get their goldfish or whatever.
Right. But really, when we're talking about this specific book, which by the way, if you want to, I mean, it's really simply written, and you outline all the elements of how we can have optimal health as we age. This is available on Amazon or wherever you get your books. But the idea is, kids, they have a little bit more room when it comes to at least the weight gain part of it. We want them to be healthy, but...
Right, and kids don't need to restrict carbs the way that adults do over 35. So certainly, in my household with kids, I'm not, not letting them eat any starch. They're growing
go
kids
ahead,
that
French
are exercising,
fries, do whatever.
but it's all in balance, right?
Yeah.
They still need to get the nutrition in there, but they are not going to have necessarily the problems that as we get older we have.
Yeah. So I thought of that. I was out to pizza dinner with my family last night, and I didn't really get the pizza, and I ordered, a caprese salad, and my daughter was kind of making fun of me, but I'm like, I can't have what you're eating. So that's the bitter truth, folks, right?
Yes, exactly.
So I'm older than 35, and apparently, if you're just, so what happens? Our hormones start changing also, especially as women?
Right, especially but everyone. So obviously as women, our estrogen, progesterone levels are declining, testosterone's even declining, but then there are other hormones that are related to digestion that are changing over time too. So there are things like leptin, adiponectin. You don't hear as much about those hormones, but they have to do with satiety and fat burning, and bitters can impact those. And then even with just regular digestion, there are hormones like cholecystokinin. It can be kind of complicated, but not important that you need to understand it all in order to get the benefits. Obviously, you eat the bitters and it's going to help you out.
Well, let's talk. I think people are starting to understand insulin a little bit, but it's not just about diabetes.
No.
I mean, even in my own blood work that I did with you, it apparently showed that my A1C, all that's fine, but apparently another number, my insulin resistance was not great, which means I'm just gonna, I guess I'm gonna eat those carbs and they're gonna turn to fat.
Exactly.
More
makes
quickly.
You way more sensitive to carbohydrate.
And so what do you do? Because that happens to a lot of people as you get older.
Right, exactly. And you're not going to necessarily see that on your annual physical screening. An insulin is never part of that. You're just going to have your metabolic panel that has glucose on there. Sometimes people will get an A1C. That can all look completely normal and optimal, and then you run a fasting insulin and it will be outside of optimal range. So as naturopathic doctors, we use 5 as our cutoff, and even on the lab reference range, it will be 17. So even if you saw it yourself, you would go like, oh, I'm good. If you were like 12 or 13, but that's high. That shows that you
I was 11.
Yeah, so it's some carbohydrate intolerance, insulin resistance. It means insulin's hanging around too much in the bloodstream and not getting like taken up in the cell and degraded. And so the trick for that is obviously reducing a lot of the carbohydrate, like the starchy carbohydrate in your diet. Obviously, like greens are carbohydrate, like that's basically all that's in there, but those are not going to impact your insulin in any negative way. You can eat as much as you want in greens, really. Like you really don't need to calorie count greens.
Right, and like berries, lots of berries.
Yeah, you can eat berries. They will have a little bit more fruit sugar in there, so you should control portion sizes on berries. More like a cup a day would be appropriate size. And then along with that, as we were saying, like insulin and glucose are both impacted by the amount of bitters in your diet. So the more like concentrated bitters that you can get in there, the better off you're going to be, as long as you're reducing those starches too to get like the optimal effect.
Okay, so the good news is you're not stuck with this. I mean, yes, our metabolism is aging, but by doing this, by having more bitters in your diet, by reducing the simple carbohydrates, the breads and the pastas, we can actually bring those numbers down.
Oh yeah, for sure. You can like go on that sort of like dietary change, retest, you should see your numbers are better. Sometimes we might use some herbs that actually have bitter components in there as well that are impacting the bitter receptors, but they're also impacting things like insulin and glucose tolerance. And so sometimes we might use an herb like berberine, for example, to augment the effect of what's happening with diet. But for the most part, we think about like diet obviously first, that's foundational, and then we might add on something else if it's like particularly challenging to get that number down. But we usually see some level of change if people are really committing to making dietary change.
So does that mean you can have a cheat day? Like people say, okay, I'm really good Monday through Friday, and then Saturday I went out and I had pizza and dessert with my kids.
Yeah, so for some people, there is actually a gene that impacts cheat day, where they have this, it's called the weight loss regain gene, and so they will undo every bit of good they've done during the week with like one cheat meal, essentially.
Oh my God.
And gain it all back. So I've seen this, and that's kind of like the typical yo-yo diet, like where someone is kind of going up. But it can happen even in one meal or one day. So it's not a good idea for a lot of people because of this gene. And for some people, it's not as big of an impact, that you can just have like a little bit, but just do it in moderation, right? Yeah. Like that's how I think about it, because you also don't want to have like extreme food stress either.
Yeah, you want to, the good thing is if you love chocolate like I do, chocolate is a bitter.
Chocolate is
as long as it's dark.
Absolutely. So dark chocolate, low sugar, that's going to have a really great impact on those bitter receptors.
You brought some of it, some of your favorite brands, but this is what I want people to look for, right? Because people say, oh, you eat chocolate every day? I'm like, well, not a Milky Way.
Right.
I mean, this is you want everything to be above 70%.
Yeah, so all of these, so 2 of those are from Trader Joe's, and they're both 73%, so they're both dark chocolate, pretty low sugar, and then even lower sugar and high cocoa polyphenols is this Theo brand, and that's 85%.
There's only 4 grams of sugar in here.
Yeah, and that's in 3 squares or 4 squares.
Oh,
so
3 or 4 squares. Would you like to have something? I know you're busy talking. Let's just see. I'm going to prove it to people. It tastes good. I bought this brand before, so I didn't know. So the Theo brand is naturally lower in sugar.
Whole Foods. Like it's really easily, widely available.
This is 85% dark, but in my book, it tastes delicious. It's not too bitter.
Right. No. Like it's blended nicely, and it's a good, like, fair trade sourced chocolate.
And sometimes I like to make, tell me if this is good or not, I know I have to watch how much fat we put in there, but sometimes I like to make your own like homemade Reese's peanut butter cup. You take a little square and dip it in the almond butter or dip it in natural peanut butter.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Totally fine.
And a little green tea. And then you have like this I don't know, if I eat stuff like this, it'll
Yep.
keep me from having, you know, the pie or the cookies or the brownies.
Exactly, right. And that's not going to impact your like insulin in any negative way. Like all of that is actually good for your insulin.
There's another supplement, and you might need to do this with a doctor. I'm not sure, and I'm not sure even if you detail it in the book, but it's something that we've talked about called Insinase that I've done some research on, and I know
Yeah.
you even recommended.
Yeah.
But does that help people? And is that something that people should incorporate, or that's more you need to work with a naturopathic doctor?
So it is a really interesting supplement, and it's basically it's a very specialized extract of the hops plant. So most people think about hops in beer, and that's often what gives beer that bitter flavor is the hops. So when people are like, this is pretty hoppy, a lot of times beer will be more bitter as a result of that. And beer is even graded like on a bitter scale. Like,
is it a good
quality.
bitter for us?
Yeah,
or?
but it is. So hops is a good bitter. Now, obviously, if you're drinking, like sitting down and drinking like 3 or 4 beers, like that's not going to be good.
Because that's too many caloric.
insulin.
But what if you had a little bit of beer? That's actually a bitter?
That is a bitter, yeah. And
or the
like
old-fashioned
alcohol, like so
bitters, alcohol.
Yeah, bitters, digestives, like that whole like aperitifs and digestives that are prime, like Campari, Aperol, gin. Those are all made from complexes of herbs that are like infused into that like alcohol, into that spirit. So a little bit can actually prime your digestion. I wouldn't do that necessarily every day, but that's another source of bitters.
So if you're going to go out, and I know alcohol will be a whole nother talk because there's a whole problem with that. But but if on your website you actually talk about certain cocktails. So if people are wondering, all right, I know that I should have lemon water, I should have a salad first, I should snack on olives. If they want to have a cocktail, what would be a Dr. Stagg bitter prescription cocktail?
Yeah, so I would say one of the like if I'm having a cocktail, one of my favorites is a Negroni.
Okay.
And that is Campari, which is that infused like really red colored Italian spirit. And like people will often, I don't know if people are familiar with the Aperol spritzer.
Yeah.
Aperol is kind of similar to Campari, but a Negroni is Campari, vermouth, and gin. And all like the vermouth isn't as bitter, kind of like has a little bit of sweetness to it, but you can get it dry. And then that's just like concentrated, and you don't like, you just use small amounts of each amount and of each type of liquor and put it on ice and put, you know, an orange slice or lemon slice in with it and sip it slowly, and that's a really great bitter cocktail.
Bitter, okay. I see capers. I love capers. So just even the way of doing like cooking recipes that have piccata.
Yeah, like piccata.
Without all the, I guess, butter and flour.
Right, yeah, but like adding capers or like, and mustard, like even have like mustard seed here, capers, a lot of the things that are used in like classic country French and Italian cooking are just so great for our digestive system. And starting out, you know, cooking with onions and garlic, those are great sources of bitters. I put radishes here, even radishes, eating like sliced radishes as a snack instead. Like a lot of people will put baby carrots in their kids' lunches, but you can slice radishes. Like my kids will eat radishes.
I love radishes.
They'll also have like some baby carrots or just regular carrots sliced up too, but I'll like mix it up with different vegetables because it's good to have that diversity.
Okay, so the other thing is, and we're gonna have to sum this up in a minute because our show is ending, but the bitter feelings chapter is we also just, you know, too much stress, too much anger, too much overwhelm, that is bad for our digestive system. So you have some nice exercises, even like simply just doing a thankfulness before you eat can help you digest your food better.
Yeah, absolutely. So taking that time to actually sit and be grateful for the food in front of you, being mindful of your eating, that's so important to your digestion. And most people are just like eating and on the run, which I've definitely been guilty of that myself. Like I'm certainly not judging anyone because that's me too. But when you can really focus on trying to just be more mindful and in the present and being like having that attitude of gratitude, it does affect your entire health.
Dr. Jennifer Stagg, the author of The Bitter Prescription, thank you for being here. Thanks for watching CURES. Have a great day, everyone, and be well.